Here's something that will change how you think about the $100,000 milestone forever. When most people reach $100,000 saved and invested, they assume they're 10% of the way to $1 million. That's the linear math. 100,000 is 10% of 1 million, so you have 90% left to go. But that's not how compound interest works, and the actual math tells a completely different story. My name is Trinity, and today we're going to walk through the real numbers, the ones that show why $100,000 invested isn't 10% of the journey to 1 million. It's closer to 1/3. And understanding why that's true will change how you think about early saving, about the cost of delay, and about what you're actually building every time you contribute to your investment accounts. Hit subscribe if you want financial content that does the math other people skip. And like this video if you've ever thought about $100,000 as a destination rather than a launch point. Let's run the actual numbers, because this only becomes real when you see the arithmetic. Assume you're 30 years old with $100,000 already invested, and you stop contributing entirely. No additional money ever goes in. You simply leave that $100,000 alone for 30 years, invested in a diversified portfolio, earning the historical average annual return of approximately 7%. At the end of 30 years, when you're 60, that $100,000 becomes approximately $761,000. You didn't contribute a single dollar after age 30. The $100,000 did that entirely on its own through compound returns. Now here's the part that reframes everything. To reach $1 million by age 60 without that initial $100,000, starting from zero at age 30, you would need to contribute approximately $1,050 every single month for 30 consecutive years, never missing a payment, always investing to arrive at the same destination. The $100,000 already sitting there is doing the equivalent work of 30 years of $1,050 monthly contributions, without requiring a single additional dollar from you. That's why it's not 10% of the journey, it's doing a third of the work. Let's look at this from a different angle to make it even clearer. If you have $100,000 invested at age 30 and you continue contributing $500 per month for 30 years at 7% annual return, you reach approximately $1,560,000 by age 60. If someone else starts at zero at age 30 and contributes $500 per month for those same 30 years at the same return, they reach approximately $567,000. The only difference between these two people is the initial $100,000. That one starting advantage is responsible for roughly $993,000 of difference in the final outcome. That's the real weight of $100,000 invested. Not the cash value today, but the compounded future value it represents across a full investment horizon. This is what mathematicians and financial planners mean when they talk about the time value of money. But most explanations of that concept are so abstract that they don't produce any actual change in behavior. So let me make it concrete in a different way. Every year that $100,000 sits invested, it generates approximately $7,000 in returns at 7%. That $7,000 then gets added to the base, which generates slightly more the following year. By year 10, the original $100,000 has grown to roughly $197,000, meaning it has almost doubled without a single additional contribution. By year 20, it's approximately $387,000. By year 30, as we calculated, close to $761,000. The growth isn't coming from new money. It's coming from returns on returns on returns. The compounding mechanism that Einstein allegedly called the eighth wonder of the world. Though what matters isn't who said it, but whether you've arranged your financial life to benefit from it. Now let's talk about the flip side of this, which is the cost of delay. Because this is where the math becomes genuinely alarming in ways that motivate action. If that same $100,000 sits in a savings account earning 2% for 5 years before being invested at 7%, the final outcome at age 60 drops from $761,000 to approximately $617,000. The 5-year delay cost $144,000 in final wealth on a $100,000 base without spending a single dollar. The money was still there. It was simply not working at the rate it should have been. If the delay is 10 years, the $100,000 waits until age 40 to be invested at 7%, the final outcome drops to approximately $508,000. The decade of delay cost $253,000, more than twice the original amount, simply lost to the passage of time. This is why the financial advice to start early exists, but that framing understates what's actually happening. It's not that starting early is a nice habit or a sign of good discipline. It's that each year of delay mathematically eliminates a specific calculable amount of future wealth that cannot be recovered by working harder or earning more later. You can earn back money you spend. You cannot earn back the compound returns that didn't happen because the capital wasn't invested. Those years are permanently gone from your compounding timeline. Here's where this connects to the one-third framing in a way that changes how you prioritize. If you're currently at $50,000 invested and you're thinking about whether to make some financial decisions differently to reach $100,000 faster, the real question isn't whether you'll have $100,000 sooner. The real question is whether the compounding engine will have an extra year or two of runway. At 7%, an extra year of compounding on $100,000 is $7,000 in year one, more than $7,000 in year two because the base is larger, and this pattern continues for every year of your investment horizon. Getting to $100,000 one year earlier than you would have otherwise is not a $100,000 decision. It's a decision worth potentially $200,000 to $400,000 in future wealth depending on your time horizon. The magnitude of the decision is determined by the compounding clock, not by the face value of the number. This reframing has direct practical implications for how you should think about your next financial priority. If you're deciding between paying down low-interest debt slowly versus accumulating invested capital faster, the calculation needs to include the full compounding value of invested capital over your horizon, not just the interest rate on the debt. If you're deciding whether to increase your investment contribution by $300 per month, the calculation isn't simply $300 times 12 months equals $3,600 per year. It's $3,600 invested at 7% for 30 years, which is over $27,000 in future wealth per year of contributions. Each decision about invested capital is a decision about compound returns across the full remaining timeline of your investment horizon, and treating it as a simple present dollar decision dramatically undervalues what's actually at stake. Let's bring this back to the original insight and make sure it's fully landed. When you have $100,000 invested, you are not 10% of the way to $1 million. You are in a position where the compounding mechanism, left alone for 3 decades, would take you more than 3/4 of the way there without additional contribution. Combined with ongoing contributions, you are positioned to reach 1 million dramatically faster than someone starting from zero. Not because you have more discipline or more income, but because you have a compounding engine with 30 or more years of runway. That engine, once running, becomes increasingly difficult to stop through any reasonable level of spending. It generates returns. Those returns generate more returns. The math does what the math does. This is why the $100,000 milestone carries the weight it does in personal finance. Not because it's a round number that signals achievement, though it does, but because it represents the crossing of a threshold where compound returns become a meaningful, visible force in your financial life. Below this threshold, the compounding is real, but subtle. At and above it, the compounding begins to feel like something happening to you rather than something you're doing. Your money develops a momentum of its own, and that momentum, once established, is the financial equivalent of building a foundation on which everything else becomes structurally easier. If you're on your way to $100,000 and you feel like you're moving slowly, remember what the slowness is purchasing. Every dollar that gets added to the base today is a dollar that participates in every year of compounding between now and the end of your investment horizon. It's not just the dollar, it's the dollar plus every return that dollar will ever generate. The slowness of the accumulation phase is purchasing the scale of the compounding phase. That trade is one of the best deals available in personal finance, and it's available to anyone with enough time and enough willingness to leave invested capital alone. Drop a like if this changed how you think about what $100,000 actually represents. Subscribe if you want more financial content that makes the real math clear instead of just celebrating the milestones. I'll see you in the next one. There's one more layer to this that almost nobody addresses, and it's the behavioral dimension of crossing $100,000. Research on financial behavior consistently shows that reaching this threshold produces a specific change in how people relate to their investments. Below $100,000, the dominant emotion around investing tends to be either excitement about growth or anxiety about downturns, with anxiety often winning during market corrections because the losses feel large relative to the total accumulated. At and above $100,000, something shifts. The returns become large enough to feel like participation in something real. A 7% year on $100,000 produces $7,000 in growth. That's a tangible, feelable number. It's more than many people save in a month. When you can feel the compounding working, the emotional relationship with investing changes from, "I'm hoping this works," to "I can see this working." That shift in emotional relationship is what sustains the behavior across market downturns, across life disruptions, across years where it feels easier to spend than to invest. The milestone doesn't just change your math. It changes your conviction. Shlomo Benartzi at UCLA has written extensively about how making investment growth visible changes investment behavior, which is part of why financial advisors and retirement platforms increasingly show projected future values alongside current balances. When you can see that your $100,000 is projected to become $700,000 without additional contribution, the decision to leave it invested rather than spend it carries a completely different emotional weight than when it just looks like a static number. The $100,000 milestone is when that visibility becomes genuinely motivating rather than hypothetically interesting. Here's what to do with everything in this video in practical terms. If you're below $100,000, prioritize reaching it aggressively. Not because the number itself is magic, but because every month of additional compounding runway you can purchase by reaching that base sooner is worth multiples of its face value over time. If you're at or above $100,000, understand the actual weight of what you're carrying and stop treating it as a static achievement. It's a compounding engine with a specific and calculable output trajectory. Respect it by leaving it alone, adding to it consistently, and resisting the lifestyle upgrades that lifestyle inflation will inevitably begin whispering about as your account balance becomes more visible and your financial stress diminishes. The milestone is not a destination. It is the point at which the journey stops being primarily about how much you contribute and starts being significantly about how long you stay invested. Stay invested. The math knows what it's doing. Let me give you one final comparison that makes the one-third framing undeniable in a way that should stick permanently. Imagine two people both trying to reach $1 million by age 65. Person 1 starts investing at age 25 with nothing and contributes $700 per month for 40 years at 7% annual return. They reach approximately $858,000. Person 2 starts at age 25 with $100,000 already invested, perhaps from an early windfall, an inheritance, or simply aggressive saving in their early 20s, and contributes the same $700 per month for the same 40 years at the same return. They reach approximately $3,432,000. The only difference is that starting $100,000. The same monthly contribution, the same return, the same time horizon, the same discipline. The $100,000 head start produced an additional $1,374,000 in final wealth. That's $1.5 million generated by $100,000 across 40 years of compounding. This is not an unusual or extreme example. This is the standard, unremarkable output of the compounding mechanism applied to a meaningful starting base across a realistic investment horizon. When you understand this, you understand why financial advisors who genuinely care about outcomes treat the $100,000 milestone as a turning point rather than a checkpoint. The turning point isn't that you've proven something about yourself, although you have. The turning point is that you've crossed a compounding threshold where the mechanism begins carrying a portion of the work that previously required all of your discipline and all of your income. The engine is running. Now, the most important thing you can do is not turn it off. That's the real story of $100,000, not 10% of the way, 1/3, and the math gets more generous from there. One thing worth addressing before we close is the question of what counts toward that $100,000 threshold. For the compounding math to work as described, the money needs to be in invested assets, stocks, index funds, retirement accounts, not in a savings account earning 1 or 2%. Cash sitting in a bank is not participating in the 7% historical average return we've been discussing. It's participating in whatever the bank is paying, which historically runs significantly below inflation in real terms. This distinction matters because many people reach a $100,000 cash balance, feel the psychological weight of the milestone, and don't realize they haven't actually crossed the compounding threshold we've been discussing. The $100,000 that does what we've described in this video is invested $100,000. It's capital at work. The version that just sits in checking or savings is capital waiting to be put to work, and every month it waits is a month that its eventual compounding trajectory has been shortened. Get it invested. Keep it invested. And understand that what you're looking at when you see that number on your investment account statement isn't $100,000. It's the beginning of a much larger number that the math is in the process of building for you, whether you're paying attention to it or not.